From the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy, it's Retro Nerd Girl with a film review for you. Today, I'll be reviewing the movie Project X, released in 1968, starring Christopher George, Greta Baldwin, and Henry Jones. Directed by William Castle. The synopsis is: Hagen Arnold is a spy with a mission to infiltrate the enemy of the Western world, the Sino-Asians. However, he returns home without a memory. What we know is that his last communications were that the Western world was 14 days before its doom. It's up to doctors and scientists to discover how to save the world from the lost memories left in Hagen's brain. Now the story. The story, in my opinion, is very, very good. It's one that could definitely work as a great page turner in a book. And that's exactly the source of this film. 2 books by Leslie Purnell Davies called The Artificial Man, released in 1965, and The Psychogeist, released in 1966. It starts off a bit boring with lots of exposition explaining the world and what has happened to Hagen Arnold. The script is really good in some places, and then it falls completely flat in many others. Specifically, it was good when it came to the technical dialogue, but really awful when it came to social dialogue. We could say that maybe it was the language of the olden times in the 1960s. The story explores the matter of wiping and building memories. This is a fascinating subject matter to me. And, I really wonder if humans will be able to do this one day, or maybe they've already learned how to do this right now in secret. The doctor in charge of the Western scientists is Dr. Crowther, who talks about the memories that make a person's matrix, their mental capacity to know what is real and what isn't. The film is a little reminiscent of Total Recall, released in 1990. And speaking of coincidences, the main character in this film is Hagen, and the top dog, evil bad guy in Total Recall is Vilos Cohagen. I thought that was an interesting coincidence. Now the pacing. At 1 hour and 37 minutes, it's a bit too slow in the beginning, as I mentioned before, and it really needed a few more edits and more cinematic music, sound effects, to really fill out the scenes. There was something a little bit bland about it. Now, at about 45 minutes into the story, it gets a punch of action, and it really finishes really strong and thoughtful. Now, the challenge in the film. The challenge in this film is the mysterious scheme of the Sino-Asians, who seem to be a conglomeration of all Asian countries. The main thrust of the story is a war between East and West. The fear of the Asian domination of the West has been a constant subject matter for centuries, and as documented in many books and films in our own world. So this story could have dipped into that realm. Their leader, Sen Chu, is extremely well-spoken and has developed a way to manipulate DNA to mass harvest male babies while planning to devastate the population of Westerners by sending back a deadly virus into the body of a retrieved war hero, Hagen Arnold. That's a pretty brilliant scheme. And there's a little wagging of the finger towards America's use of the atomic weaponry in the 1940s. also built into the storyline. The Sino-Asians have also gotten a willing participant in the traitor Gregory Galleya. He's very, very manipulative and convincing as a good guy. He even looks and sounds very heroic. So you believe him up until you find out that he is actually a bad guy. He isn't a smart villain, but he's compelling enough to cause a lot of trouble for our heroes. Now, the empathy. The story centers around Hagen Arnold, but as a lead character, he's not very compelling, unfortunately. Most of the time we see him, he's either asleep or confused because he doesn't remember anything. He doesn't actually get to be the hero of the story either. Don't get me wrong, he was a hero for the West because he of what he was supposed to do when he went to Sino-Asia, but he's not really the hero in this story. Well, actually, he kind of is, I guess. Well, you know what? Guess what? I think he is too, because something strange happens in the story. The repressed memories that he has creates this monster, this sort of spirit-like evil monster that kind of goes after the bad guy, and that's pretty much how they were able to capture the bad guy. But so I guess he's a hero, but it's sort of like an accidental hero. On his last mission to Sino-Asia, his memory was wiped as a safety precaution as to not reveal any secrets to the enemy. Okay, so when he arrives in Sino-Asia, he's already got a clean slate. He doesn't know who he is or why, but he does know that he has a mission, right? So while he's there, he receives some information which he's able to share, that the West has 14 days before the Sino-Asian attack, which pretty much remains a mystery throughout the entire movie. Now, in order to find out what will happen in 14 days, Dr. Cruther creates a matrix for Hagen to unleash his memories. And, this is very funny because we have the movie The Matrix, released in 1999, which talks about a matrix, a phony world, if you will, or a make-believe world that the computers have created for human beings in that movie. And in this particular movie, this new matrix that Dr. Cruther creates for Hagen is essentially a fake world and has given him a completely new identity. So that way they can slowly coerce the truth to the surface. Hagen is given the identity of Alan Fraser, a bank robber hiding out from the cops in a remote location in the 1960s. It's a clever way to keep him confined with his mission, while at night, while he sleeps, they use this holographic memory reading device so they can see his memories. So, I never just understood why he just never came clean and just told everyone, look, I don't remember anything. But he kind of plays along with the situation that's been created for him. And he, unfortunately, he doesn't trust anyone that's around him, but we never learn why he just decides to play along. But he does. Hagen also gets a love interest in the story, Karen Summers, who is an employee from a nearby factory that converts dairy products into pills. It's so weird, such a weird concept. Although the scenes with her in it are interesting, she doesn't have a big part to play in the story other than to get Hagen to lighten up during his whole ordeal. Now, the real star of the film, in my opinion, is Dr. Crother, who you really expect to be the evil mastermind. Gaia even uses Dr. Crother as a scapegoat and says, oh, Dr. Crother is the mean guy who was planning all of this whole time. And it's so easy to believe him because, yes, Dr. Crother is very unusual and strange the way he's always smiling and coming up with all these interesting ideas and plans and seems to know things other people don't know. And he's also very smug about everything. And so you think that, that would make Dr. Crother unlikable, but it doesn't. It just makes you curious about what he'll do next because he has a lot of ideas. And not a lot of them are all great, but he does have ideas that gets us to the next progression in the story. And I really like the tension and the banter between he and Colonel Holt. Holt even fires him and threatens to incarcerate him during the last stretch of the story. And yet it's Dr. Crother who comes up with the last strange plan to save the planet. A true hero, that Dr. Crother. Now, the technical aspects. The film is written, scored, and filmed like a TV movie. As well, it's important to note that many of the sound effects were swiped from the Star Trek TV show. What's fascinating about the Dream holograms is that Hanna-Barbera animated effects, layering the live action shots with animation, monochromatic colors, wavy imaging, double exposures, reverse negative images, and creative lighting, such as haze and black silhouettes. I actually love that, and I love how they utilized all those aspects to create these visual effects in the story. The animation use is much like the way modern films use computer animation. It's a shortcut to convey the story without having to create them in reality. And I understand it's actually kind of funny to see, like, all of a sudden everything becomes an animation. However, like, again, it was the only way to show the things that they couldn't do visually without CGI at the time. So bravo, I appreciated that. It wasn't realistic, but it was still creative. Now, I wouldn't say that any of the visual effects worked, but it created some pretty unique and inspiring visuals, and I really enjoyed seeing them really try to pull this off to tell the story. Now, the performances. The performances were a mixed bag of good actors and not so good ones. But the most part, the majority of them were good. I mentioned that the film has a very TV production style to it, and many of the actors of note in the film are most notably known for their TV work. Christopher George as Hagen Arnold was pretty good and very believable in all of his emotional states. He had to play the hero, confused, angry, in love, and he does it all very well. Henry Jones played Dr. Crother, and he really makes all of these happenings in the film seem believable and probable. Even the corny stuff. He just brings so much gravity to every scene he's in, and I loved his performance. It had a whimsy to it as well. Monty Markham was excellent as Gregory Gaia. I almost didn't recognize him because he's usually never had facial hair in his other roles, but there just wasn't enough time with him on screen. I think it would have been much juicier of a story, and to add more scenes with him in it, where we could actually like find out what's going on with that character. And a special note of Ki Luke as Senchu, also famously known for being the grandfather in Gremlins, released in 1984. It was awesome seeing him in this, and he, of course, was amazing. Now, the best part of the film. To me, the best part of the film was actually the most boring part, the beginning. I know most people find that part really boring, but it's the part when we learn the most about this interesting world and the technology that they possess. I really geek out about stuff like that. Now, the ending. I loved the ending, actually. It seemed like a happy ending, but it's actually kind of sad. Poor Hagen is actually a brilliant mind in the Western world, but he's wiped of his memory several times in the story. And he's ultimately given a simpler life, a simple, average life. Now, I know that Hagen knew that that would happen when he agreed to do the mission in the beginning. And it's the very reason Gaia turned out bad. He rather kill than to lose those memories. He rather turn his back on his country than to lose his memories. And I guess, you know, it actually comes full circle, because his memories is exactly what saves the day in the story. So it's kind of interesting. Now, back to Total Recall, because I can see the connection to Total Recall in this, because where Project X ends with the protagonist's memories being repressed and assigned a wife and a new identity, this could be where Total Recall begins. Mind blown. This could be the prequel to Total Recall, guys. Well, I mean, I'm such a big fan of Total Recall. I'm ready to connect the associations between any movie and Total Recall, to be very honest. But yeah, there's another little coincidence, a little something to think about. All right, so my wish list. Well, my wish list is that I wish that the scientists created a simpler matrix for Hagen to retrieve his memories, or even just tell him the truth about who he is, because it seemed like such a roundabout way of doing things. I also wish that Karen had a purpose in the film other than to be the love interest. She spends only a few minutes talking and walking with Hagen, and then now she's suddenly ready to marry him. And you know, I know it's possible for someone to fall in love instantly with another person, but it could have been more compelling if she had more to do with discovering his memories, helping him to discover his memories, and not just be a pretty face to keep the story from being all about guys, you know? So, now there are two movies by the name of Project X made after this one. One in 1987 and then another one in 2012. Neither one of them is a remake. But I feel like this is an excellent film that could use a remake. Great idea. And it just needs the help of modern day special effects and a good writer to really update the story. Hollywood, get on this. If you want to, I'll help write. I've got some ideas. Now, my enjoyments. I love the subject matter and a lot of the ridiculous concepts that other people may get really hung up on. It isn't my favorite movie of all time, but I do like it a lot. It's really compelling and thought-provoking in a really surprising way, because on first impressions, after a few minutes, you get a lot of exposition, a lot of corny 60s elements, but it totally builds into a highly involved story by the end. This film is also a commentary of the time, and it uses stock footage from 1964 to 1968 to play with the idea that people in 1968 live in what they believe to be the modern world. But in the eyes of someone from the future, it's actually quite primitive to what humans can achieve. I love that. I love that idea. Also, and not to mention, I just love the overall creativity of trying to do a science fiction movie in the 1960s that is low budget, okay? And just the courage that it takes, that knowing that the audience isn't there for it. There's going to be a small group of people who will be interested in it. I absolutely love that kind of bold attempt at a time in which it just wasn't popular. My rating is a 7.6. Well, that sums up my review. I hoped you liked it. This is Retro Nerd Girl signing off. Take care, movie lovers. I'm off to my next review.